So our bears hibernate about between 3 and 5 months. That's kind of typical up here. Last season was the longest hibernation period ever. It was 170 days. So we did build them when they came, as I said, custom hibernation den. It wouldn't have been possible for the two young cubs to find a suitable den out in their habitat, and it wouldn't have worked either because actually bears can wake up during hibernation. So even if they could have found a den out there, once we take all the fences down, we would not have wanted to see grizzly bears wandering around the ski hills. So it had to be in a den that we could lock. So we're looking for three things in the late fall, so we know when to lock them in. It's not the same day every day or every year. We looked that they put on that consistent weight. If they're not eating any of the food we're offering them in November-ish, carrots, apples, and yams stay in the field and they've turned off the food, that's another indication. And when they're spending a lot of time in that sleeping chamber already, so those three things indicate to us that we could pretty much lock the bears in at any point. So sometimes if the winter comes early, we could be locking them in late October. As I said, last year was November 10th. The latest they were ever locked in was Christmas Eve. That was the year 2002, their second hibernation period. So it really varies. Anyway, the last thing we do with staff is we go pull some of the amabilis fir boughs off the trees. Big, beautiful boughs that have vitamin C in the needles. They're very fragrant. And we toss them in inside the habitat. And the bears drag those boughs into the sleeping chamber. It's mostly Coola that drags them in, and Grinder just sits outside and supervises. He doesn't like to do the work. But they make a nice mattress inside their sleeping chamber, and then we top it up with straw, so the bears are quite comfortable. Fortunately, wild bears don't have it so comfy. They're going to find a den, possibly in the hollow of a huge cedar tree, maybe between some rocks, and of course it's going to get covered in snow. So we installed cameras again. That first year the cubs were here. We weren't sure how two little cubs, being without their respective mums, would hibernate. So we decided to put them in the den together and watch them all winter. And it was quite fascinating as we saw that the cubs moved around. They actually got up, left their sleeping chamber and had a little walk around this other area that they have, and then they go back to sleep. So they're having isometric muscle contractions all winter long. They're weight-bearing. They're flipping over a lot, just like humans. And actually, for this reason, they are not true hibernators. We should use that term loosely. True hibernating animals go right to sleep completely for the winter. So a better term would be a dormancy period or a denning period. Anyway, some fascinating physiological adaptations occur when the bears are sleeping, things going on inside their body. So their heart rate slows down somewhat. Body temperature drops a few degrees, not too low, because they still need to warm up that den with their body heat. The respiration rate slows down. The metabolic rate is going to drop, how they burn off calories. They're not producing any waste. We're not giving them any food. The water in their body is, the kidneys are especially adapted to recycle that water. So lots of fascinating adaptations that allow them to last. Our bears, as I said, 3 to 5 months, and wild bears anywhere from 2 to 6 months. Black bears hibernate as well. There's black bears all over North America, and if they're down south and there's still food source available to them, they won't necessarily hibernate. Anyway, females will have their cubs during hibernation. It's a nice safe place to birth and then nurse her cubs. It's very interesting when the female gets pregnant in the late spring. Fertilization occurs and the embryo is there in the uterus, but it does not embed into the uterus and start to grow until about 5 months later when she's just about to go into hibernation. So if she's fat enough, a really healthy sow, she will, the embryos will implant in the uterus and then start to grow, sort of in November-ish. And then the cubs are born in late January, February, so a 3-month gestation period. And again, that's a physiological adaptation that at least keeps that female bear alive. If she was to be super underweight and to birth 3 cubs, the whole 4 of them might not survive the hibernation period. Anyway, we watch our bears closely as spring rolls around. The air temperature really can warm up fast and the snow starts to melt. The bears sense that and they wake up. They're still kind of sleeping every night, but they're moving around more and more in that big green building. And when we see that, we immediately have to get our excavators out and our diggers out because we could have 5 meters of snow. Literally, you're standing way up here on the snow in the wintertime, and we're walking down into the buildings. So remember, all these fences have been taken down. We can't let the bears emerge from hibernation until we have the fencing set back up. So we start with a small area, fenced area first, and let the bears out. They came out April 29th this year, and then we work on setting up the fences in the upper habitat and then the lower one. So anyway, they come out to a very snowy habitat. They start digging snow caves and sleeping outside. Once they're out of hibernation, they don't like to go back into the den. And we start, as I said, feeding them just water for the first couple of weeks. They probably have still a little bit of fat on them. And we're hoping that wild bears do come out with a bit of fat on them because there's not a lot of food in the spring when there's still snow up in the mountains and what have you. So they need that little bit of extra fat. Anyway, we eventually start with the staple diet that I mentioned, and the whole process repeats itself. They've got to put on that extra weight for hibernation. So I'll just finish up by saying we won't be releasing Grinder or Coola. The reason for that is because when they came to us in 2001, Grizzly Cub and Grizzly rehabilitation, rescue and rehabilitation, was just in its infancy. So what I mean by that is, you know, people couldn't just go rescue a bear and then keep it and coddle it and handle it and feed it and then go, oh wow, this guy's getting big, I better let him go. Because bears can quickly form an association between food and who's giving them that food. So when they came to us, there weren't any facilities that were rescuing, rehabilitating, and releasing grizzly cubs. So we watched our bears closely, and kind of shared information, and we do have rescue centers now. There's a great one up in Smithers called Northern Lights. There's a Critters Care in Langley. There's one on Vancouver Island. I'm sure Alberta has some too. So bears are, if they're rescued, cubs are rescued, they're hopefully trucked, taken to these facilities. They're kept there for a couple of years, enough to put on some weight in a much larger habitat than this, where you can cut down on a human interaction and the bear's actually knowing where the food comes from. But we try to cut down on that too by scattering the food and not having them see us. And then these bears, once they put on enough weight, they're maybe 2 years old, they can be released again quite successfully, and you don't have to worry about a human-bear conflict or interaction. So I want to thank you all for joining me here today. It was a great crowd, and it's a nice cooler day today. We have a lumberjack show going on at 3 o'clock just over here. There'll be another bird interpretive talk just in the outdoor amphitheater over there. I'll do this talk again at 4:30. The chairlift's running till 7 tonight. If you have kids here, we have our kids tree canopy over in our ropes course, which is a really fun place to play. A nice walk around Blue Grouse Lake, just by that green building way in the distance. Anyway, thanks again for joining me, folks, and enjoy the rest of your day up here at the Peak of Vancouver. Appetite at the time, and as I said, it's just to put on the weight that allows them to survive through hibernation. So if you were here in late September, October, you would see a transformed bear, really even bigger than they are today. And what we have to do is get these bears ready for hibernation. They've always hibernated up here every single year. It was a natural thing to do. We never even gave it a thought to try to keep them out in the snow all winter and have to feed them huge amounts of food. That was not natural. It wouldn't have made sense to do that. So we do start to shrink the habitat that you see. And what I mean by that is we get Grinder and Coola into the upper habitat here, and we lower the door under the bridge, and it's completely locked for the rest of the season. So now they're up here, and then eventually we get them over by their den into a smaller fenced area, and we close the door there. So we then have to come around and take down all the fencing you see. So there's the wooden fencing here called the human standoff fence. There's a deer fence. And then inside the deer fence, there's 6 lines of electric wires. So that takes about 2 months to take all this down in November and store it away in some big bins. It would get damaged if it stayed out. Skiers would run into it, as there are ski runs through the middle of their habitat. Anyway, let's talk about hibernation. So bears hibernate. The one single reason is not because they're tired, not because they're getting cold, it's because their food source disappears. Being mainly vegetative eaters, they're going to run out. They do eat a lot of plant material. It surprises people to see these bears in here eating grass, just like a cow. So a grizzly's trying to find nutritious food for the least amount of foraging effort. So that is not chasing around prey every day and expending calories. We categorize them as opportunistic omnivores. So they're looking for whatever food presents itself to them. That's a lot of plant material. It's ripping logs, flipping rocks over, looking for insects. They're scavengers as well. They'll feed on dead animals. But a lot of plant material. So here at the refuge, we try to follow what's going on in the wilderness. They have about an 80% vegetative diet and about 20% meat. So what can they find in here by themselves? That's definitely what we like to see. It's what you see in front of you. They'll feed on the new grasses, dandelion leaves, clover, wild licorice weed, horsetail. They've got the bushes you see in there are salmon berries, and then there's more blueberry bushes up there. They're just coming into season here on Grouse Mountain. So all that food is part of their diet. But at 5.5 acres, we do supplement their diet, and it's with mostly fruits and vegetables. So when they come out of hibernation, it's big heads of romaine lettuce to get the digestive system working again, and just water. And after about a month, we introduce apples, carrots, yams, or sweet potatoes, and we offer them a dry dog kibble, which has meat and fish product in it. So in effect, they're getting a little bit of that every day. So that's the staple: carrots, apples, yams, and dry dog kibble. And we do toss that food in over the fence. These bears have not been hand raised. They were put in here, as I said, September 5th, 2001, let out of the transportation cages, and that's the last time anyone was ever in a habitat with them 20 years ago. I've never touched the bears. So they've been left to be as wild as possible in here, and for that reason, we never go in there with them. So Trevor, I think, is going to toss some food. He's going to scatter all around the 5 acres, and then the bears will have to go looking for it.
Oh, yeah.
And then sometimes we put the dog kibble inside their den just as an emergency protocol, emergency training protocol. Anyway, we don't feed them at the same time every day. They got that salmon this morning, and that definitely was a lot of protein for them. So we're going to give them the fruits and vegetables and just see how they do the rest of the day. But we don't like to get them on a human breakfast, lunch, and dinner schedule. We don't want to condition them. So it's up to each ranger to choose what time they want to feed them at and kind of keep them on their toes. Anyway, these bears, I gave you their weight already, but they still have a lot of weight to put on. They're hibernating animals, so they do have to put on a lot of weight that's going to carry them through the winter, because they are not fed by us, and wild bears obviously are not getting any food while they're hibernating. So Coola here, last November 10th, just before he went into hibernation, he was at about 1,050 pounds.